Hello, my name is Daniel Schoonmaker. I'm the Executive Director of West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our presentation today. For those that are not familiar with our organization, the Forum is a collaboration of business and institutions dedicated to promoting sustainable business practices with a focus on climate leadership, social justice, circular economy, and community resilience. This is the 8th in our series of online discussions on how the coronavirus pandemic is impacting sustainability and sustainable business. Upcoming webinars include opportunities for underutilized facilities during COVID-19 and understanding startup needs, featuring Mike Trupis from Foresight Management and Kevin Van Dyke of Fay and Zylstra, which will be your program next week. Advancing Social Equity and Sustainability in Michigan, featuring Lynn Todman of Spectrum Health Lakeland and City of St. Joseph, Laura Goose of the City of St. Joseph, and Mary Jo Schnell of the Out Center of Southwest Michigan. And finally, looking ahead to toward regaining some sense of summer normalcy, how lake levels and COVID-19 will impact beach and river cleanups, featuring Joe Bramar of the Alliance for the Great Lakes, Brianna Meeker of PADNOS, and Kathy Evans of West Michigan Shoreline Regional Development Commission. Videos of today's program and the prior sessions are available on demand at no cost. You'll find a link to those in the chat shortly that you may like to bookmark. You'll also receive a link to those with a feedback survey and any additional notes that come out of today's program. This series and all of our programs are primarily funded through membership donations. If you're not yet a member of our organization, I'd encourage you to become one. There has never been a better time to do so or a greater need. To that effect, I'd like to recognize our new corporate member, Newers Heaven of West Michigan Services. You may also be learning about how to become engaged with our group through our various working groups. We facilitate a dozen such opportunities around various issues of importance to local Michigan industry and communities, ranging from recycling to social justice. And we have one launching only for the first time next week that I'd like to bring your attention to. We're working with a number of partners on what we feel is an important initiative to help local business leaders gain some increased control over the future of their communities or businesses in the states. We know these next few months are going to be an incredibly important time, and it's very possible that what we do now will determine what will be the new normal for economy in terms of equity and sustainable business. So we're organizing a group of business communities from across the state to help us chart what a post-COVID economy should look like. This will be facilitated by our organization in partnership with American Sustainable Business Council, Local First, and some other organizations across Michigan. We're hopeful to publish a paper highlighting our findings from these initial conversations sometime in this next month. So if you are interested, we are hosting initial online discussions on the evening of May 11th, next Monday, and the afternoon of May 12th, with the same content in each split up to allow for more effective discussion and to accommodate schedules without having to do a scheduling survey on such a short time frame for these important discussions. If you are interested in that, feel free to send us a note via the Q&A or the chat today, or look for information that we'll be sending out via email later. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Rose Spickler, Membership Manager for West Michigan Business Forum, who will be monitoring our program today, Resilience of Farms and Farmers Markets during and after COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you, everybody, for coming and attending this webinar and this forum. We're really excited about it to learn more about what we can learn from farms and our local farms and our farmers markets. Now I want to introduce our panel for today. We have Amanda Shreve from the Michigan Farmers Market Association. She's the Executive Director. Lori Lundell, the owner of Lundell Farms, and Michaela Rouden, the farm manager of McLaughlin Grows. So welcome all of you. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And we can go ahead and get started. So for our attendees, first and foremost, please note that you can share your thoughts with the panelists or all of the attendees via the chat function. You can also ask questions through the question and answer field. Before we get underway with any of our questions, would you mind all introducing yourselves and what brings you to our roundtable today? Mikayla, why don't we start with you?
I think I'm unmuted here. Hi, I'm Michaela Rouden, the manager at McLaughlin Grows. I am just excited to kind of talk about how we've been able to shift a little bit, and then also just how pre-COVID small farms have been super adaptable and kind of met the needs of the community, and how we're just still continuing to do that as the world has kind of been upended.
For people who aren't familiar with McLaughlin Grows, can you give us a little bit of background on what that farm is?
Yeah, so we are a nonprofit. Community and Compass is our parent organization. So we have 3 different sites throughout downtown Muskegon, totaling about 1.5 acres of growing space. So we offer a CSA for community members, and people are able to pay via sliding scale based on their income or with their EBT, or do a work share. So we offer a lot of different options just to kind of create food access within the city. And then we also do a high school, like, early job training program. So high schoolers work on our farm from June through August, and we kind of create leadership opportunities throughout the summer for them to kind of gain some insight on farming and also kind of channel their creative energy into different projects. So yeah, that's kind of a rundown on what we're up to.
Perfect. Lori, why don't you share next?
Sure. My name is Lori Lundell, and my husband John and I own Lundell Farms in North Muskegon, Michigan. We have about 1.5 acres of produce. We offer a CSA each year, and then we also raise meat. So we have pork, lamb, sometimes beef, chicken, and then eggs also. We follow organic practices, although we are not certified organic, but we do our best to, work with the environment and keep it as healthy as we can, both the food and the world around us.
Awesome, thank you. And Amanda.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Amanda Shreve. I am the Executive Director of the Michigan Farmers Market Association. And we are a statewide member-based nonprofit that supports farmers markets and farmers and vendors that sell at farmers markets. We have a mission to advance farmers markets to create a thriving marketplace for local food and farm products. And most of our work focuses around professional development, food access, and advocacy at both the state and federal level for our members. And I'm pleased to be joining the webinar today. And before we get started, just wanted to lift up that we do have a number of resources related to the COVID-19 situation. Would direct you to our website at mifma.org. And a couple of pieces I would highlight there. One is guidelines. We have guidelines and recommendations for farmers markets as they're thinking through modifying their operations for this market season. And additionally, we have created some posters in English and Spanish and Arabic for customers within the market to help reinforce the CDC's social distancing recommendations or guidelines for shoppers in a market setting. And these tools are available at our website and free to download and post in farmers markets and farm stands and anywhere where we want to be reminding our customers that of the behaviors that can help keep our marketplaces safe. So thanks for having me.
Thank you all of you. All right. So we're very, very excited to hear about more about what we can learn from farms and farmers markets from all of you. To kick us off, the containment tactics for the pandemic have forced many businesses and industries to make drastic changes. And farms and farmers markets are obviously no different. Some farms have moved to online ordering, some have moved to roadside produce stands, things like that. Farmers markets have had to make many alterations. Some examples of those, I know the Fulton Street and Holland and Muskegon farmers markets are all three of them are open, and farms are bringing food to them, but they are very limited. There's hand washing and sanitizing stations. There's a lot of different precautions for social distancing, which I know farms are doing for their on the actual farms as well. So what are some of the changes that you've had to make in order to alter your operations for COVID-19 related changes? Mikayla, why don't you kick us off?
Cool. So at the McLaughlin Grows, we have seen a huge shift kind of in like our labor. I have an assistant manager and a farmhand that are full-time now. But throughout all of March and April, I had to shift volunteering. For a while, we were having no volunteers on the farm. And then after a few weeks of that, I kind of shifted into a schedule where we could have 1 or 2 volunteers and make sure that our tasks were correlated really well with social distancing and keeping everything sanitized. So that was a major shift, because previously we just had volunteers around all the time, and I really relied on that just in starting the season. And then one of the other big changes is just kind of moving things towards more online. We recently opened up a online farm stand so people can order produce, seedlings, and eventually we'll hopefully have compost up there. And we're offering delivery or pickup, but we found that most people are utilizing the delivery option, which is really cool. And we've tried to keep it as accessible as possible. So people living within downtown Muskegon or Muskegon Heights, delivery is free. And then once you get into like North Muskegon, Whitehall, and Norton Shores, we've added a little bit of a delivery fee. But I think people are really excited about farmers being able to kind of shift into online platforms. And then we have a plant sale in May. And previously that had just been like, come to the farm on these dates and pick out your seedlings. And we shifted that to an online pre-order form, and we'll be able to do no contact pickup. So those are our biggest shifts at the farm.
Lori, how about you? How about your farm?
Lori, you're muted.
Sorry about that. We're looking at making some changes to our CSA pickup. Typically our CSA pickup on farm is what I refer to as buffet style. So everything is laid out. We have the crates of, say, a crate of cucumbers, a crate of cabbage and whatnot, and people get to choose which one they want. This year we're going to offer an option of we will pack your box for you. The buffet style has always been something that Lundell Farms has offered that a lot of other CSAs don't. And so we've kind of viewed it as a perk. But in these times, we're going to offer an option. So if they would rather not have everyone touching their produce, we'll just pack it up for them and have it sitting out front of the farm so that they can just swing in, grab their bag and go. So they have less contact with people and less people touching their food as well. That's our biggest, that's probably our biggest change, besides things have just been picking up and been busier than normal.
Amanda, what have you seen with farmers markets changes?
Yeah, thank you. So farmers markets have been dealing with a lot of information, and we know that some markets are year-round or have extended seasons where they're open in the spring or late in the fall, and those markets were the first to have to consider how to modify their operations to ensure the safety of their vendors and their customers. And as we get towards May or into May and towards June and July, we have more and more of our seasonal markets coming on board. So markets are dealing with modifications like increased spacing to allow for all customers and vendors to keep that 6 foot of social distance in between others in the marketplace. At this time, under the current executive orders, we're also seeing markets having to tackle the idea of limiting the number of people in the market at one time. And we have seen some restrictions so far in the types of products that can be sold at farmers markets. And we'll continue to monitor the executive orders that come out and the guidance as the possibility to sell more and more products opens up this summer. But the main aspect of change, and Mikayla and Lori have both touched on this, is so many of, or a significant portion of the experience of purchasing from local farms and from farmers markets is a social experience. Mikayla, you talked about coming to the farm and having times where volunteers, are working together. And Lori, you talked about that buffet style and just having this open invitation to come to the farm each week and interact with you as the farmer. And a lot of those social interactions are key to the relationship that customers have with local farmers and farmers markets. And that's where we're seeing the biggest change is in restricting those social interactions and focusing more on the transaction between customers and farmers. So farmers markets will look different this summer for sure, as they are community gathering places. And in the past, we've really focused on adding features and atmosphere to markets through music and cooking demonstrations and activities for children and seating areas where you can sit within the market and visit with your neighbors and with other customers and with your community. And those aspects are temporarily being removed from market settings. And more systems being put in place to streamline the purchasing process, have customers come in, quickly identify the products that they want to purchase or pick up if they pre-ordered, and then exit the market and return to their homes. So a much more focused shopping experience this summer on the efficient transaction between customers and vendors, with much of the social atmosphere and culture temporarily removed from these markets.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem like these past months are helping us to understand the importance of our farms and the farmers markets to the communities and our economy, like you just highlighted, definitely with the communities. It highlights some of the issues that we're already aware of concerning the resilience and sustainability of our supply chains, some more than others. Can you share some thoughts on the sustainability and resilience of farms, markets, and our food system pre-COVID-19? And are there things that we should be talking about that we're not talking about? Mikayla, what are your thoughts?
So I think I can give more of a small farm perspective. I know that the larger scale of the food system and farming is way different than what I've experienced just as a small farmer throughout the years, because we're such a small portion of the world's food. But I think small farmers are adapting super well to COVID, as we've had to in the past, just being flexible, fitting into niches, understanding where we can be better, where we can better suit the community. And because, as it's been touched on quite a few times, we are often just we're in contact and connecting with community members so often that we're able to kind of shift easily, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's my main thought on it. Like pre-COVID, we were doing that and like meeting the needs of our community in ways that like the larger food system often doesn't. So now as COVID is happening, we're able to take things online, and I've seen more people like calling me to hear about how farming is going and like how they can get connected. So it's still very social and community oriented. But that's way different than like the larger food system.
Well, they're all definitely pieces of it. Amanda, what about your piece?
Yeah, I think that farmers who sell direct to consumers and farmers markets have and continue to be really symbolic of sustainability and resilience. And I'm encouraged by reports and anecdotes of consumers wanting to more directly make those connections post this or during and after this situation. I received a phone call just last week from a reporter, not from West Michigan, so you can be assured of that, who was wanting to do a story around how this situation is affecting the production decisions of farmers. And one thing he said that really alarmed me was that with restaurants closed, there's less demand for food. And I think that's very inaccurate. We still have the same number of people in our country and in our world to feed, and to feed well, intentionally. And I think what we're seeing now are shifts in the supply chain. And that's where we're seeing demand shift from restaurants to, unfortunately, to food banks. And we're seeing, school food shift out of the school environment and into the community. So we're not seeing less of a demand for food, but we're seeing a demand in different markets and in different delivery mechanisms. And a couple of the conversation points that I hope that we can continue to educate consumers around now and in the future. One is how responsive and how flexible production plans can be, and also how flexible and adaptable they are not able to be. And for example, one of the questions that he asked was, well, how will production plans change for this month, for this season in response to this situation? And for some farmers, they will have an opportunity to change some things. But for other farmers, particularly when we're talking about meat production and animals, and also perennial crops and fruit orchards, those production decisions have been made and are in the works from months and possibly even years ago. So for example, we aren't going to see an increased production of apples this year, because if we were going to see an increase in apple production, we would have had to see planting in previous years, and those trees need time to mature before they can increase production. And we can't as quickly as we may need to or want to shift meat production, because animals will need to have been bred and been born months and months ago. So in some aspects, our food system is able to quickly change and modify, and in other ways, those decisions have already been made and they're already in the path of production. And Lori may be able to add more to that. And the other thing that I think is coming up now is also this topic of seasonality. And something that we can continue to work on educating consumers around is the seasonality of production, especially fruits and vegetables. And especially here in Michigan, where we do have 4 seasons and variability to those seasons as well. So some of the decisions that have been made and some of the executive orders have had implications for different fruits and vegetables based on their seasonality. So decisions that are being made right now and impacts for today are affecting crops like asparagus, whereas production of Michigan apples is not yet significantly impacted, because we're talking about that production more in the fall. So seasonality is also something that I think is is really pertinent right now. And when we talk about sustainability and resilience and adaptability, so how responsive production plans can be and how important seasonality is to production, especially local production here in Michigan. A couple of thoughts that we can continue to educate consumers around.
Yeah, those are great thoughts. Laura, do you have anything to add? Other things that we should be talking about that we're not, or other thoughts on sustainability and resilience of our food system?
I just think that Amanda made some really good points there about the resiliency, and funny that that reporter had said that the food needs were getting less, because that's absolutely the opposite of what I'm seeing. A lot more people are cooking at home. They're preparing food. They're not eating out so much. So therefore they need more food in their refrigerator and in their cabinets. And so we are getting a lot of people who are really now, because of the supply chain failures at this point, actually, a lot of people that are calling us, really knocking our doors down saying, hey, we need more produce. We want meat. What can you do for us? The grocery store doesn't have any chicken right now. What do you have? And that type of thing. And so we're really working really hard to adapt, to increase where we can, and educate the consumer to those abilities as well. Just like Amanda had said, just sent out my chicken order forms today for the rest of the summer, so that people can see that, okay, I can't get, a dozen chickens right now, but I can get them throughout the summer, and that sort of thing, so that we can plan ahead for that. And then as far as our produce goes, a little bit easier to change our plans. Still not great, but some items have a shorter growing time, so it's a little bit easier to adapt to those as well. So we'll be making a few changes there and trying to get more stuff available, more produce available and in the hands of the consumer earlier than what we may have otherwise done on a normal year.
Excellent. Great. Definitely great thoughts and things that we definitely need to be talking about. I asked a version of this next question last week as well. Farms and farm workers are now considered essential workers. Laura, I know I just asked you, but can you talk about about what it means to be quote unquote essential? And do you think the work of local farmers is valued that way?
Yeah, so it's funny because I think that as far as our farm animals and our garden is concerned, farmers are very essential. We can't just not do chores today. I can't not feed my animals. If the garden needs weeding, it needs weeding. And so those are essential things. And so we've been living that life and we know how that is. However, right now for the average consumer, it's a whole new thing. It's not something we always think about. Because we have this global food supply chain, we're able to get avocados when we want them and bananas and things that don't grow here in Michigan. And so, so it's definitely been a change, and people are learning a lot. But especially now that because of those supply chain shortages, and we see, we've seen just in the last week or so, a lot of news articles and news stories about some of these really large, the meat processing plants shutting down. So there's farmers who are euthanizing thousands upon thousands of animals, dairy farmers dumping gallons and gallons of milk, thousands of gallons of milk, and produce that's just being plowed under because they don't have the workers, they don't have the staff to process it as would normally happen. So for the small farmers, for us small local growers, it's a lot different because we're more able to adapt a little bit. We're more able to keep going and maybe increase a little more, where the large scale farms are decreasing. We might be able to increase just a little bit. So I think that's something that is, everybody's learning a little bit more about that right now. Lots and lots of articles online about the food supply chain and how that's working. And I think a lot of people are getting a large education on the changes and how, small local farmers are here for you, and we want to do what we can to help everybody out and make sure that you're getting what you need. And we're feeling it right now. We are getting a lot of support from our customers. Our regular customers are right there for us, and so many new customers. So it's really been busy and crazy for us, but as far as small local farms go, it's an uptick for us, and we're working it as best as we can.
Awesome. Amanda or Mikayla, thoughts about being an essential worker and whether or not it's valued that way?
Yeah, I think Lori said it super well. She explained almost every single one of my thoughts also. Yeah, just in seeing like the heightened fragility of like our broader food system, I think people are noticing the smaller scale farmers. And I'm hoping that that's a long-term kind of shift in communities' mindsets. Like farmers need to be taken care of. We're out there feeding you. So it's been a lot of mixed emotions, just in being frustrated that that's like we're at this point in our food system that we're having all of these issues, and so many things are being thrown away and animals are being euthanized, and grocery stores are empty. And I mean, in Muskegon, we're seeing a lot of even more just heightened food inequity that's not necessarily always talked about. Yeah, it's just bringing a lot of different things to light that I hope are shifted and not just talked about within farming circles.
Yeah. Amanda, any other thoughts you want to add to that?
I think Mikayla and Lori did a really great job there. I think for me, what I'm hearing from consumers who had existing or past relationships with farmers, whether that be directly, like through a CSA or a community farm like Mikayla runs, or one step removed, but still very direct through a farmer's market, I'm hearing things like how thankful they are that they had those relationships, how grateful they are that they, had a freezer full of meat, or had relationships, or had orders placed, or knew how to contact farmers and knew how to access, the food that was in place. Farmers who are selling eggs right now are heroes and in many regards, and highly sought after. And we're seeing things circulate on social media and reports of farmers who, shifted milk from selling into a pasteurizer and a distributor to bottling on the farm and selling, and how well received that's been. So for people who already had those relationships, I'm hearing a lot of thanks and a lot of gratefulness. And to Lori's point, the people that didn't have those relationships before, some of them are quickly trying to make those relationships and build those bridges and build those connections, and that's going to be a great result for local farmers. And I echo Mikayla's hope that once those relationships are built through this process, that they are maintained, and that families really look to local farmers and the connections they can make there to be a more significant and long-term portion of their food plans, and that we see some shifts in that direction.
Yeah, speaking of learning things and maybe having some more lasting changes, throughout COVID-19, many parts of the food system have been highlighted, and many, many different questions are being asked, like, how do I find a farmer? And about the food that people are eating. And one of the topics surrounds meats versus plant-forward diets. Another one covers the environmental and health issues of pesticides and herbicides that are being used on farms, and just a lot of different questions about what food is, what people are ingesting. Have you seen changes in the interest in the selection at your farms, or more customers asking questions about health or plant-related benefits? Mikayla, have you heard anything about those things?
Yeah, I have had a lot more interest in, or a lot more people contacting me just about gardening questions. Like if they can source their seedlings from us, how they should organize their garden, what they should be growing to best suit their family, how much. So it's been a huge shift in just kind of people wanting to sustain themselves and their families, which has been really cool to see. So I guess it's not necessarily a lot of people asking about like health related benefits, but more just like people are really interested in starting gardens and knowing about how to take care of plants in a way like nobody's asking me about sprays and chemicals. It's very natural focused, which is great.
Awesome. Lori?
Yeah, you know, I've had more people calling to look into getting their produce from us and their meats as well. And it's really been interesting in that as far as, for instance, the meat goes, people are asking questions like, well, what is grass fed? What should I be looking for? What are the best things? You know, there's a couple other farmers that might have something. What do I need to know? And I'm really just I always go back to the same thing. And I always tell people, know your farmer and ask questions. Do not be afraid to ask questions. And if the farmer doesn't want to answer your questions, they're probably not the farmer you want to go to anyway. So, you know, I think that's really important. And so I'm really, you know, encouraging people to do that, because a lot of these people are new to the local food scene and there's questions that they might not have thought of before. And they're bringing it to the forefront and they're asking. So that's good. So I think that's something that's been helpful. That's mostly where it's been. I haven't had a lot of questions about the produce, but with the meats, a lot of people, you know, that grass-fed, what does that mean? What's the flavor? How is it going to be? Those sort of things. So I am getting those questions, and I think that people are used to buying their meat in the grocery store. They just grab what's there. It is what it is. But now they're thinking, oh, okay, if I'm buying from someone local, should it be better than the grocery store? Is it going to taste the same as the grocery store? Is it not going to taste as good? Those type of things. And so it's, you know, a little bit more of education, and everyone, you know, working a little bit harder to learn about their food. And maybe not because it's something they were really interested in before, but because it's something that they just need to deal with at this point. And it's all new and hopefully exciting for them, and hopefully they're learning good things and will stick with a healthier diet and healthier local foods as this, you know, after this is all over, if I can say it will be over, as things start to get a little bit more back to normal. Hopefully people, you know, keep those things in mind and continue to go forward with more concern for the environment and for the animals that we are eating, if we're eating animals, and so forth.
I think that's a really great point, and that's something I was actually just going to bring up. Amanda, I'd love to hear any thoughts you want to share also, but I think it's important to note that resiliency, to an extent, usually means going back to. When we, you know, in the farm industry currently, we don't really want to go back to. We want people to stick with things that they're learning through these experiences, and continue to ask those questions. So does anyone have any thoughts on, you know, along with the changes that you're seeing and the questions you're hearing, how do we continue to educate and maybe not even just be resilient, but be progressing through this time?
Yeah, if I may. I think that one of the things that we're doing here at Lundell Farms is, you know, getting more people to sign up for that newsletter, encouraging newsletter signups, because then I can continue to send out those newsletters monthly to say, hey, this is what we're doing on the farm this month. This is how it's happening. This is what we're involved in right now. And these are the opportunities. Because it's all education and to keep those people in the know. I also think that we can absolutely use this as a jumping board into continuing on with the education piece and keeping people interested in other ways. You know, more talks like this. Once we're able to do them out in public, we can have more, at local community places, areas in the community that you can, libraries and whatnot, more talks about eating local and eating good quality food, why it's important to eat good quality food, why the food's important for our bodies, and why it's important for the environment. So I think all of those things are something that we can continue to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that accessibility of information is huge. So we've kind of started planning more workshops that are online to increase our social media presence and like preserve relationships through that. And hopefully teach people in ways that like they can move forward knowing their farmer, and also like be learning about gardening and food and what they're consuming and feeding their families.
Yeah, Sandy makes a good point in the chat box, and it was something that I was hoping to have an opportunity to check in or to touch on too. Rose, you said maybe not wanting to go back, but I think there are some really great aspects of the food system of previous generations that are worth going back to. Things like canning and freezing and taking fruits and vegetables at the peak of their harvest season and preserving them for use all year round. Going back to a time when we had greater connections with farmers, and we made a relationship, and we did get a quarter or half of a beef once a year to feed our family all year round. Or back to a time when we had a relationship with a farmer where we got a dozen eggs a week directly from their production. Or back to a time when we had a stronger connection to our food and where it comes from, even to a time when we were gardening for ourselves and our families. And there's so much that we can do even when we live in urban settings with community gardens and container gardening and so on and so forth. So I think there are some lessons from previous generations that we can learn and we can apply now with the knowledge of promising practices from those times of what worked well and what didn't work well. But with more time at home right now, perhaps there can be a return to some of those aspects of previous generations that did work well.
Excellent. And Matthew just mentioned to this point, what are the possibilities of going back to a smaller, more decentralized processing model as opposed to massive facilities that can fail? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I think for me, the thought is there has to be a balance between a large commercialized production and small scale production. We have a lot of people across the globe to feed, and we need to be able to, we should be able to feed all of them well. And so that, in my opinion, requires a balance between large commercial production and small scale localized production. And I think we also need to be thoughtful. Mikayla, you made a point earlier about inequities in the food system, and we still have large socioeconomic ranges across our communities, and each one of those kind of stages in a financial situation have different abilities to access food and different needs. And so there's, in my opinion, there's a place for both. And this is Amanda Shreve's opinion, not necessarily the opinion of the Farmers Market Association, although I think it would parallel well. In my opinion, there's a need for both.
I would say that one of the things with that is the seasonality factor. And if we are to focus more on the small and local, then the consumer needs to be aware of seasonality. As Amanda had mentioned earlier, you may not be able to have a nice salad in December. There's not a lot of daylight hours in Michigan in December, and even in greenhouses, it makes it more difficult to grow. So I think that that's part of the thing that people like about the large food system. We can ship in produce from California and Florida or Brazil or wherever these things are coming from. We can ship that in any time of the year. You can have produce that's fairly fresh, not frozen anyways, and people are used to that. That's something that we're definitely used to. You go to a restaurant, you can have the same menu year round in that restaurant because they're able to ship those things in from all over the world. If we're going to be changing to a more localized food system, then we have to consider that and say, maybe there's certain things that we eat more in the winter and other things that we eat more during the growing season, especially in areas like Michigan where we do have snow in the winter. So I think that's one of the things. And also, as was mentioned earlier, the putting up the produce, so canning, things like that. You're able to then have that produce that's grown in the summer, but we can still eat it in the winter, but just in a little bit different form. So canned tomatoes rather than fresh, and so on.
I think Lori has a really good point. I appreciate you adding that. This conversation makes me think of a quote from that I've heard Dr. Mike Ham with the MSU Center for Regional Food Systems talk about in the past. And his approach to local food systems, as he's described it, is we should purchase as much locally as we can. So when we can, we should, essentially, is the mantra. And I really identify with that and support that kind of mentality of as much as we can purchase local, as seasonally as it is appropriate, as much as our family's finances will allow, and as much as our local food system can create, then we should. Opportunities, or there are opportunities for things that we can't purchase locally or can't grow locally. I love bananas, and as a Michigander, I'm never going to eat a local banana. So what we can source locally, we should, and where we can't, then we benefit from a global food supply and global food system when we can't.
All right. At this time, I'd really like to open it up to other questions. If anybody has any other questions, just enter them in on the Zoom webinar chat. And we can hear some questions from our audience and get some answers from our panelists. All right. Jeffrey says, I'm an evaluator for a Michigan group that focuses on access to local food options for low-income families, including dietitian lead education and healthy eating. Do you have thoughts on how to keep access open to local healthy food options year-round for these lower-income populations?
I could maybe speak a little bit to that.
Mikayla, why don't you start and then...
Sorry. So we at McLaughlin Groves, we're super small scale, but we've placed ourselves within neighborhoods that are really low income. And we've really, before doing anything, we've taken the time to evaluate like how we are providing food access for people. So that's why we've really shifted our CSA model into accessibility for everyone. Like I'll deliver to people if they are not able to get to the farm, and that's free. They can pay with their EBT. Sliding scale is still really affordable. And just kind of working with everyone where they're at. We're not year round. But we also have a Muskegon Prescribed Food for Health class, which does go year round. And through that, we lead people to like the YMCA Veggie Van, where they can get food all year from farmers, and it's all like really local and healthy. So just kind of leaning on local resources in the winter, and then in the summer we preach about seasonality and kind of work with what we have.
Mikayla, your example of this sliding scale for your CSA is a really great example of how you make local food approachable and accessible. And I think, being a community-based farm, it's clear how that's part of your mission and part of the work that you do. And I applaud you for that. A couple of programs that I would lift up. One is the Double Up Food Bucks program, which is a statewide SNAP incentive program that matches SNAP dollars spent at participating retailers. There are over 120 farmers markets and farm stands that participate in the Double Up Food Bucks program throughout Michigan. And at those sites that participate, when a recipient uses their SNAP Bridge card or the new pandemic EBT card that is currently available in Michigan or has been issued in Michigan, they can earn up to $20. That cap has been lifted. So when you use your SNAP Bridge card at a participating retailer right now, for every dollar you spend in SNAP, you can receive an extra dollar matched to spend on more Michigan-grown fresh fruits and vegetables. So previously, that program had a $20 per limit or $20 per day limit on matching, and that's temporarily been suspended. And so participating sites can match as much as the SNAP recipient is spending. So that's a program that really expands access to healthy food and is a choice-based program and really empowers SNAP recipients to incorporate more fruits and vegetables into their diet. The prescription or the produce prescription program that Mikayla mentioned is also a model that's in as many as 12 to 15 communities across Michigan, where a healthcare provider would partner with a local food system and prescribe fresh fruits and vegetables to clients or to patients who are either managing or at risk for a diet-related chronic disease. And they take that prescription to the local health or the local food system and use it as an incentive to buy fresh fruits and vegetables to help improve their diet. So those are just two examples of programs that help increase access to healthy food. And there are other opportunities in the COVID stimulus packages that have been passed at the federal level, including a food box distribution program that was just out for bid, and responses went in last Friday to purchase food, pack them in boxes like a CSA model, and distribute them to families in need. And it's our hope and our intention that the partners in Michigan that have responded to those bids will certainly access and purchase food from local farmers to include in those boxes. So I think food access and innovation in food assistance programs has really been something to highlight that we've seen as part of this response.
Awesome. Really quick, we've got a bunch of questions coming in, but does the Double Up Bucks increase include family fair markets as well? Do you know that answer?
Yes, and some retailers have increased the cap and some retailers have completely eliminated the cap. And so it's important to check with each retailer. I believe in family fair settings, they've increased the cap to $50 per day, but certainly check with your participating retailer about what that cap is or is not for each site.
Okay, awesome. Let's see, some other questions that we have are, with development pressure still existing for more land, what is the future of farmland to farm?
I think to that, it's interesting that I think sometimes there's confusion about how much land is actually needed. We have, our gardens here are just over an acre, and we're providing produce for over 50 families. There's a lot that you can do if you do intensive gardening and intensive growing, and there are so many front lawns out there that are just full of grass. And I would just so much love to see people growing food in their yards, in those empty lots. And I know that's something that's really been happening more in the cities, and Mikayla might want to speak to that more. But those empty lots in the cities that can be turned into gardens, community gardens, there's just so much land out there that we don't necessarily think about as farmable. It may be small scale, but you can grow a lot of produce in a small amount of space if you really put your mind to it.
Yeah, I agree with Lori. Our farm is on 3 different urban plots, and we've partnered with 3 different community organizations. So we partner with the hospital and Muskegon County, the city buildings, and then Avashur, a medical supply company. And all 3 of the plots that we're on were just grass, and they were just going to be fields, and we've been able to take them and build something beautiful out of them. And all 3 of our partners are just really grateful that the space is being utilized, and we're providing food to, our CSA is about 60 families. Yeah, and it's just an acre and a half total. So you can really do so much. And I know like neighborhood associations are often adopting lots and would love for people to put like raised beds on or start gardens. So there's lots of different options, and land is everywhere.
Awesome. And then maybe our last question that we addressed today, and I'm hoping maybe all of our panelists will agree that I can either forward on questions to them they can answer, or maybe that I can send out their contact information in our receipt email. So either one of those 2 will be definitely an option. But what programs are available for the school systems for kids, K through 12, to learn more about farming or having a CSA within the school system if their property allows it, or if a farmer would allow them to work as part of their land, or some sort of program for K through 12?
I know Food Corps, at least in Muskegon, they have a couple members that are working in mostly elementary schools, but some middle school classrooms, doing different educational courses on like cooking or gardening. And it's often really seasonally focused. We have a pretty good relationship with the 2 current Food Corps members. So we sent out like CSA brochures to kind of teach families about the idea of a CSA model. But I think that's the only education option I really know about. Oh, and we also, at our farm, we have the youth employment program, and that's funded mostly through Michigan Works. They're great in supporting youth programs and just uplifting the kids in the community. And the farm is just one of the youth employment options, teaching about farming. So
awesome. And Lauren just mentioned the Blandford Nature Center also typically offers an educational programming on their farm, possibly postponed due to COVID, but it is something that we can look into. Thank you all so much for being on this call and this webinar and being our panelists today. I hope that all of our attendees found the talk very valuable. I know that I did. It was very interesting. I will follow up with a couple of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat and the question and answer, and try to get more information to everyone. And if you found our talk valuable today, please consider becoming a WMSBF member or checking out our website for more upcoming webinars and other opportunities how you can get involved. So thank you all so much and have a fantastic Cinco de Mayo.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Have a good one.